Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Welcome, dear listener, to Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Set aside some moments now and take an adventurous ride on a journey into the psyche of some talented writers. They will dig into your being and titillate you. Oh, I love that word, titillate. While the stories may not all take place in the Heartland, I am delivering them to you from the Heartland. My intention is to strike fear and confusion into the mind, soul, and yes, the heart. This is Fear from the Heartland. Hello, Heartlanders, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 21.5 of Fear from the Heartland. I'm your host, Paul J. McSorley. Hey, Heartlanders, you guys patrons yet? Visit simplyscarypodcast.com and click Patrons in the upper menu to join the club. You'll get ad-free versions of this and all our other podcasts, including hundreds of standalone releases from our audio archives dating back to 2012. It's a great way to show your support, and you get a whole lot for it. No need to rewind. I said 21.5. Schedule got busy, and I wanted to take a quick break. It's not like I'm lazy, really. Hey, by the way, what kind of exercise do lazy people do? Diddly squats. Someone called me lazy today. I almost replied. While there is not a new story tonight, Wifey and I thought a trifecta of Shorty Small stories might be kind of cool. They are the first 3 in the series and aired in Seasons 1 and 2 on Fear from the Heartland. So, if you have heard them, it'll be worth listening again. Or if you're new to the show, then it's a no-brainer. So, without further ado, No Tears for Sarah, The Bullet, and The Walking Stick by J.C. Fields. Let's get after it. Chicago, Illinois. Shorty Small, a man neither short nor small, took a final drag on his cigarette. Without diverting his gaze, he flicked the butt to his right. Glowing flakes of tobacco scattered as the dying cigarette struck the neighboring building's brick wall. The sparks triggered small nocturnal creatures to scurry away in the debris-littered alleyway. His concentration remained on the back door of a diner 20 yards from where he stood in the shadows. The odor of rotting food in the cafe's dumpster permeated the area. A single low-wattage bulb above the restaurant's door provided a feeble glow, scarcely penetrating the gloom up and down the delivery lane. Accustomed to uncomfortable waits, Small glanced at his watch. No time for another cigarette. His mark could emerge at any moment. He did not care to know the reason why or who wanted the man he waited for dead. The money he would receive for this particular job almost compensated for his discomfort and efforts. Time passed slowly. He checked his watch again. Late. The man always brought a large trash bag out to the dumpster before closing the diner. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a figure emerged carrying 2 bags of refuse from the restaurant. He walked quickly toward the industrial-sized trash bin. When he arrived, he turned his back to Small and sat one bag down to free his left hand to raise the lid. The hitman slipped from his darkened hiding place, extracted a suppressed Ruger .22 caliber SR from the small of his back, and silently approached the man now hefting one of the bags into the trash bin. Placing the gun barrel a foot from the nape of the mark's neck, he pulled the trigger twice. Whoever the man was, or would have been, ended there in the darkened alleyway. Shorty Small disappeared into the night, leaving the now deceased target to be discovered by some hapless soul. Sleep remained elusive as the big man lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling fan slowly circling above him. Every time he closed his eyes, the faces of his victims gathered to point their accusing fingers at him. Despite the air from the fan, sweat soaked his pillow and stained the sheets on the creaking bed. He glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand, 4:22 a.m. Only the light of dawn would cause the images to go away and allow a dreamless sleep to overtake him. Somewhere around noon, he rose and sat on the side of the bed. With elbows on his knees, he supported his head with the palms of his hands. The toll of sleepless nights and constant weariness created an overwhelming weight on his shoulders. He reached for a cigarette on the nightstand. The stench of stale tobacco smoke and the pile of butts in an ashtray saturated the air of his small bedroom. Lighting the cigarette, he inhaled deeply. The rush of nicotine only slightly eased the despair he felt every morning. Alleviating his depression with alcohol or pills did not appeal to him. Individuals within his profession who self-medicated normally experienced a short career. A knock on his apartment door startled him as he munched on a sandwich made from leftover meatloaf. Extracting the Ruger from the small of his back, he approached the door and growled, "Yeah, who is it?" "It's Sarah, you big oaf. Who else would it be?" He unlocked the door and released the security chain. Properly describing Sarah continually eluded him. At first glance, she projected the illusion of a kindly grandmother. Her professionally styled silver gray hair showcased the short pendant earrings she always wore. The stone in the earrings constantly matched her outfit. Today she wore a maroon pantsuit with black wedge heel pumps. Rumors suggesting a former career as a high-dollar fashion model were probably correct, as even in her mid-60s, she caused men to turn their heads. Once you were past the outside package, she possessed the disposition of an angry, sarcastic, and bitter old woman. As soon as she passed the doorframe, she sniffed and wrinkled her nose. "How in the hell can you stand to live in this dump?" "It's my dump. No one asked your opinion." She dropped an envelope on the small breakfast table and turned to look at him. "The client was pleased, Shorty. They've already paid." The guy was a cook on the night shift of a greasy spoon diner. What did he do to piss off someone enough they would pay for him to get whacked? "I never asked questions, but rumors are he used to be an accountant who put a decimal in the wrong place and then took off with the money. But like I said, I don't ask too many questions. All I do is negotiate the contract, assign personnel, and collect the money." "Maybe you should ask questions once in a while." "Why bother?" He shrugged as he took another bite of his sandwich. "Asking questions can lead to problems neither you, nor mainly I, don't need." "Always thinking of others, aren't you, Sarah?" She smiled as she opened the refrigerator door. "Got any beer?" "Do you see any?" "No. Use some of that money I just gave you and buy some for my next visit." Shutting the fridge, she walked back toward the apartment door. "I have another assignment for you." "I'm considering retiring." Her shrill laugh filled the small apartment. "Retire? You?" "Yeah, I'm not getting any younger, and one of these days I'll make a mistake and pay for it." "Well, the biggest mistake you could make right now is to retire." "Why?" "Because I have enough information on your antics over the past decade to cause a judge to throw you into the darkest hole he can find and keep you there for multiple lifetimes." "That was not our arrangement, Sarah." She laughed again. The high-pitched sound grated on his nerves. "Shorty Small, you of all people should know better than to make a deal with someone like me. You need to keep me happy, because if you don't..." She wagged her finger and made a ticking sound. "Now, do you want the new assignment?" He didn't answer right away. He stuffed the rest of the sandwich in his mouth and mumbled, "Give me the details." "This one is worth 5 figures. Much more than the nickel and dime ones we've been getting lately." Why? He's a rich banker, and surprise, surprise, they actually told me the reason this time. He chewed and continued to stare at her. What'd he do? Seems he's been a naughty boy and keeps sticking his hand in the corporate cookie jar. He can afford the best lawyers, so it will be cheaper for them to just have him eliminated rather than the expense of prosecuting him. They are willing to pay a bonus if you make it look like a suicide. You know, like the way you always make it look so convincing. When? As soon as possible. It will take time to study him and find the best opportunity. I told them that. And? You have a week. I'll need the details. You'll get them the normal way. He nodded as he watched her open the front door. Before exiting the apartment, she turned back to him. Make this a good one, Shorty. Mama needs the money. The door closed and he stared at the empty space she occupied a few seconds earlier. One of Shorty Small's favorite places to be by himself remained the Grant Park area on South Lakeshore Drive. If he wanted to go to the Adler Planetarium, he could. If he wanted to sit on a park bench and stare out over Lake Michigan, he could. If he wanted to take a simple walk around the park, he could, and did more and more often over the last few months. During these solitary excursions, the faces and voices in his mind disappeared. He felt like a normal human being. Having grown up in the West Garland Park area of Chicago, his survival instincts were heightened by the constant threat of violent crimes in his neighborhood. Graduating from high school, he joined the Army and became an MP. After serving 4 tours in various hotspots around the world, he left the Army with an honorable discharge and the skills to effectively break up fights and corral violent men. Because of his size and these skills, a private security firm recruited him to work as a bodyguard for rich clients. This lasted almost a decade until the wife of one of the security firm's more wealthy clients seduced him one night. Without even a thank you for your service, Shorty Small found himself unemployed, without a place to live, and broke. Bouncing for a high-end bar in the downtown Loop area provided enough money to find a small apartment and to scrape by, until one of the patrons of the nightclub posed a question to him one night. Want to make some real money, Shorty? Sure, doing what? Using your hands. I'm all ears. 5 hours after Sarah's visit, he knew the name of his next target and where he lived. This usually gave Small a head start on determining the best way to complete the job. Not so in the case of Homer Morris. The man rarely left the posh apartment building near Chicago's downtown Loop. When he did leave, it usually meant he sprinted from the front entrance, guarded by a huge doorman, to a waiting limousine. Following the limousine provided problematic due to the trips being at random times and never on a daily basis. An internet search on the man provided information Sarah did not. Morris, 69 and a bachelor, did not work for a bank, nor did he have anything to do with a bank. He fell into the status of being the 101st wealthiest persons in the world, having been knocked out of the top 100 by a hedge fund operator. The more Shorty Small uncovered about the enigmatic Homer Morris, the more he suspected Sarah might be setting him up for a fall. In an attempt to discover why Sarah would mislead him about the mark, he decided it would be in his best interest to confront the man. A rich guy like Morris might, when confronted by a man like Small, offer to up the ante. If not, well, the sum offered by Sarah would work just as well. Small watched the building for the first 3 of the 7 days specified by the contract. A wide variety of services visited the apartment complex on a daily basis. However, they were always the same companies. AT&T for phone and internet problems. Always There Plumbing appeared to be the authorized vendor to take care of leaky faucets. Heating and air conditioning issues were handled by a company called All Seasons. The only vendors that varied seemed to be pizza delivery and catering services. Getting into the building as a pizza delivery guy seemed to be the easiest and least expensive method open to Small. On the 4th day, Morris left the apartment building just before noon. Small, having prepared for this, approached the building, holding an insulated pizza delivery bag, and handed the doorman a delivery ticket from a local pizza shop. 10 minutes later, he stood outside Homer Morris's apartment and, using skills learned as an MP, picked the lock and let himself into the home. The interior did not appear to be that of a lifelong bachelor. Instead, the living area decor revealed Morris to be fond of contemporary steel furnishings. Expensive area rugs accented the dark hardwood flooring. Small moved toward the flat's center and found an office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. They were filled with biographies, autobiographies, history, science, and volumes by historic and modern philosophers. A massive oak desk sat in the middle of the room with a flat-screen computer monitor and a wireless keyboard and mouse. An antique lamp sat on the corner of the uncluttered surface. He sat in the air-on mesh office chair and looked at the computer screen. After touching the space key, the display came to life. A rectangular box appeared asking for a pin. The home intruder lifted the laptop up to look at the underside of the unit. He found the code he sought, and then, over the course of the next hour, learned as much as he could about the man who owned the apartment. The door to Homer Morris's place opened slowly as the owner cautiously entered the living area. He stopped and observed a large man sitting in one of his Herman Miller Ames lounge chairs. The intruder sat there with a smile and an automatic pistol within reach on the side table. Morris showed no emotion as he gradually closed the front door. "I see you made yourself at home." Small tilted his head but said nothing as he watched the apartment owner try to determine the best approach to the problem he faced. Morris continued, "If you are going to shoot me, go ahead. I hate waiting." "I have no intentions of shooting you, at least not at the moment. Why did you put a contract out on yourself?" "Ah, that. Actually, it only appears I did." "Don't lie to me, Homer. May I call you Homer?" The billionaire shrugged. "Call me what you like. In reality, I am searching for someone to hire for a position I will soon have open." "I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. Try again." "I'm afraid I cannot give you a different answer, because this is exactly what I am doing." "You put out a contract on yourself to find an employee. Just what the hell do you do, Homer?" With a smile, Morris walked toward a similar chair to the one Small sat in, only on the opposite side of the fireplace. "I'm not looking for an employee. I am searching for an associate. There's a difference. I'm in the same business as you, Mr. Small." "You know who I am?" "Yes, I asked Sarah to specifically hire you for this endeavor, although she did not know I was the target." "Go on." "Sarah has always believed she would succeed me, but she has developed an unsophisticated streak. I find her extremely annoying, and she is horrible at her job." Small stayed silent. His right hand remained close to the Glock on the end table next to him. "You see, Mr. Small, I have built my company into a global empire with various divisions. I help governments, political parties, regimes, and dictators overcome problems they find particularly challenging to resolve." With a chuckle, Small said, "You're telling me, you being one of the richest individuals in the world, you're a hitman?" With a shrug, Morris said, "At one time, yes. I, personally, have not executed a contract for over 5 decades. Others do that for me now." "Like Sarah?" "Sarah is on the bottom rung of my organization, destined to remain there." "Where does that revelation put me?" "Independent contractor." "Why me? Why give me the assignment of trying to take you out?" "I hope this does not disappoint you, but you were not my first choice. However, all the others I have, let's say interviewed, failed. You, on the other hand, are the first one brazen enough to break into my house to ask why. And to actually get this close to me. Congratulations, you win the interview." Small gripped the Glock. "So how much are you going to offer me to let you live?" Morris frowned. "I beg your pardon?" I've had a lot of marks try to talk their way out of me pulling the trigger, but the tale you just spun is by far the grand prize winner. I am not spinning what you call a tale. I am actively looking for someone to supervise one of my divisions. Sweeping his hand across the room, Small snorted. How could you have made all this money doing what I do? I barely live from one contract to the next, yet you seem to have it all. Leaning back in his lounge chair, Morris put his elbow on the chair arms and made a steeple with his fingers. My organization encompasses many endeavors, one of which is helping with what I like to call personnel problems. But as one of the individuals who actually does the up-close and dirty work, you are paid the least. You see, anyone can pull a trigger. The smart ones learn quickly how to get others to do it for them. Then apparently, I ain't that smart. I don't believe that's the case. You actually worked for my organization when you were a bodyguard. I found you to be quite resourceful. Yeah, well, that didn't work out too well for me now, did it? Do you remember the conversation we had at Diva's on the loop? Small's reaction told Morris he did not remember. I asked you if you wanted to make some real money. That was you? I'm a little older now, but yes. So if you thought I was so resourceful, why'd you let me get fired? Being over such a large conglomerate has a tendency to draw your attention away from some of the day-to-day details. When all of this happened, I was out of the country. After I learned you were no longer with the company, I asked a few of my associates to find you. Small eased the grip on the Glock, but kept his attention on Morris. They found you at the bar. I watched you off and on over the course of several months and realized my company had lost a valuable asset. Did someone set me up for the encounter with the wife? Actually, the woman was paid to seduce you. The husband could have cared less about her, but someone you know convinced him he should demand you be fired. Who's this someone? Sarah. Small stared at Morris for a long time. Pieces of the puzzle fell into place as he once again tightened his grip on the Glock, but his finger remained outside the trigger guard for the moment. I looked through your computer. Morris's eyebrows rose. You got past the security code? A nod from Small. I'm impressed. Resourceful and intelligent. Small took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Whatever. He paused for a heartbeat. I think you're making shit up, so I won't put a couple of holes in you that don't belong. If I'm so damn important to your company, why have I worked for Sarah for so long? A sly smile appeared on Morris. 2 reasons, really. The first allowed me to see if you could put up with her abuse. You did, which means you have patience. Second, so you will have no problem helping her retire. So I had to put up with her for 3.5 years just so you could see if I had patience. Exactly. Where do you want the first bullet? Would you like a glimpse of what your future looks like? That would be interesting to see. Morris stood. Small tightened his grip on the Glock and placed his finger inside the trigger guard. He growled, Easy. Relax, Mr. Small. Allow me to walk you through the next steps of how you will become an associate. Sarah Holcomb started the engine on her BMW M4 and backed out of her townhouse garage. Not hearing from Shorty Small for a couple of days, while not unusual, made her nervous. It was time to check on him at his apartment. Her expectations of finding him home and drunk remained high. She parked the car on the street outside the rundown building. After setting the car alarm, she entered the structure. The man lived on the 3rd floor, which in this place meant climbing 3 flights of stairs. Her first knock on the door went unanswered. After the 3rd try, she withdrew a key from her purse and unlocked the door. A dark, empty apartment greeted her. The sagging sofa, the beat-up kitchen table, and the threadbare armchair were gone. She rushed into the bedroom and found the same condition. Nothing. His clothes from the closet were gone, as well as the ancient chest of drawers he kept against a wall under the window. A bed frame without a mattress remained the only reminder of the room's purpose. panic quickly spread as she added up the implications of the missing apartment occupant. The largest contract she had ever been offered appeared in jeopardy. Plus, failing at an assignment never went over well with her partners. She said to the empty bedroom, "How could you do this to me, Small?" She heard her car alarm blare below and rushed to the staircase. By the time she emerged from the building, she could see the taillights of her BMW disappear into traffic. She stamped her foot and screamed, "Son of a bitch!" Taking a series of very deep breaths, she calmed a bit and pulled out her cell phone to call 911. The police officers, who eventually responded, took her statement. When they finished, the older of the two gave her the information on where to find the police report for submission to her insurance company. As they turned to walk back to their patrol car, she grabbed the sergeant's shoulder. He glared at her and removed her hand. She said, "When will I get my car back?" The officer said, "By now, it's probably on a transport ship heading out to Lake Michigan and on to the Atlantic. File it with your insurance company, lady. The car's gone." "You can at least wait until I get a ride from Uber." Gave her a half smile. "Yeah, you'd think we would. Sorry." Patrol car pulled away from the curb as she called for a ride. The sun began to dip below the horizon when she finally returned to her townhouse. After the ordeal of the afternoon, the last thing she expected to happen did. Shutting the townhouse door, she turned to find Shorty Small standing in her living room with a Glock 19 pointed at her head. "Where the hell have you been, Small? You've cost me a new BMW M4. With a slight smile, he said, "How do you figure that?" "I was checking on you when my car got stolen. If you hadn't lived in such a shithole, I'd still have my car. You owe me big time, mister." "Sarah, do you or do you not notice the gun pointed at your head?" "Oh, put that damn thing down. Where are you on the contract?" "I haven't done a damn thing about it." Her eyes widened. "Why not?" "Let me put it another way. I decided not to do it." She continued to glare at him with astonishment. "Who do you work for, Sarah?" "None of your business." "How many contractors do you work with?" "That also is none of your business." "I'm looking at this very nice house in a safe neighborhood, and you drove a brand new BMW M4 while I live in squalor. I'm your only contractor, aren't I?" She hesitated and her eyes looked at the floor for a brief moment. "You are not." "The information I was given today contradicts everything you've always told me. The average contract you get is around $50,000. Since I know what you pay me, it works out to only 10%. If we complete 10 contracts a year, you bring in a cool $450,000 while I get paid a measly $50,000. Plus, I have to pay my own travel expenses." "Don't flatter yourself, Shorty. The contracts you get do not pay $50,000. Small rolled his eyes. "Yeah, right. If I remember correctly, when we started this little business agreement, you told me I would get 60% of the fee. 10% is a long way from 60. From what I figured out, looking back on what you've paid me over the last few years, you owe me close to 1.8 mil. Where is it?" "I don't owe you anything. I have always paid you 60%. "May I remind you of who is holding the gun?" She folded her arms and scowled at him. "If you shoot me, you'll be out of a job." "On the contrary, I'll have yours." "What do you mean you'll have my job?" "Exactly that. The last contract you gave me was a ruse. Do you know who Homer Morris is?" "Yeah, the name of the mark." "What else do you know about him?" "He's a mark. What else should I know about him?" "If I remember our meeting, you told me he was a banker. Didn't you find it odd they actually gave you information about him? I'm surprised." He paused and chuckled. "No, I'm not surprised you didn't confirm anything about Morris. You've always been lazy, Sarah." Her face grew flushed and her nostrils flared. What are you talking about?" "Homer Morris is the man who owns the company you work for. He's a billionaire and considers you an idiot." She screamed, "He is not!" as she raced toward Small. The Glock fired. The bullet entered her skull 3 centimeters above the right eye. 1 week later. Faces. Angry, distorted faces once again intruded on his dreams. They laughed, pointed, and danced in a circle. He wore no clothes as they frolicked and gestured in his direction. Sarah Holmes now appeared in the chorus, making fun of him. He tried to cover himself, but the laughter only intensified. Sleep remained elusive as sweat rolled down his forehead, adding more moisture to the already soaked pillow. The hotel room he occupied in northern Detroit made his old apartment seem like a palace. Homer Morris, or whatever his real name might have been, no longer could be found. The high-end apartment in the building near the downtown loop did not have a man by the name of Homer Morris as a tenant. The luxury apartment, full of books and Herman Miller furniture, now stood empty. Records obtained from the building manager showed the lease on the apartment belonged to a high-tech company based in Germany. As he lay there smoking a cigarette and staring at the ceiling, his disgust with his inability to resist the prospect of money and status deepened by the second. After finding the apartment empty, he spent 2 hours at a library searching the internet for more information about Homer Morris. The man did exist and indeed headed up a huge conglomerate, but the only picture he found on the web bore no resemblance to the Homer Morris he met in Chicago. As was his habit, he fell into a deep sleep just before dawn. A banging on the hotel door brought him out of his dreamless slumber. "Must check out, you no pay. $50 for extra night." Opening the door, he found a slight, ancient, angry man standing in the doorway. Small said, "It's not noon yet." "Maybe where you from? Not here. Noon here. Pay up or leave." Small towered over the man by at least 1.5 feet and outweighed him by 100 pounds. Yet he stood there showing no fear. "Let me get my wallet." As he handed the man $50, Small said, "Room ain't worth $50 a night." "Not my problem. You no like, go someplace else." The diminutive man turned and scurried away. Looking at his meager reserves, Small counted a little under $2,000 left from the $8,000 he found in Sarah's apartment. After purchasing a 20-year-old Honda Accord and 5 nights in flea-bag hotels, there would be little left in another week. He slammed the door and lit another cigarette. As he did, he stared at the laptop taken from the apartment of Sarah Holcomb. With another day and night paid for, Small sat at the rickety room desk and opened the laptop lid. The computer sprang to life without requesting a PIN. The man known to Shorty Small as Homer Morris sipped a straight whiskey while staring at the mirror behind the bar. A younger man sat next to him, nursing a beer. "Have you found Small yet?" "No, sir. He disappeared after leaving Sarah Holcomb's place." "I'm not crying over the loss of Sarah, but I do care about her laptop. Do you think Small took it?" "I would bet money on it." "Damn." Turning to the young man, he said in a growl, "Find him." The laptop revealed secrets concerning the actual business Sarah Holcomb conducted. Multiple Excel spreadsheets recorded transactions for 2 different endeavors. However, both involved crimes against individuals. Small discovered Sarah's main source of income came from the trafficking of female teenage runaways. The second source came from the endeavors of one man, Shorty Small. The more he dug into the accounting records, he found a disturbing pattern. A sizable percentage of Sarah's income ended up being turned over to an entity called Potentia LLC. Records of who owned Potentia were not obvious within the files on Sarah's computer. A quick search of the Illinois Secretary of State's office revealed the ownership of Potentia LLC consisted of 3 individuals, Sarah being one. The other 2 names Small did not recognize. Using Google to search the names, one returned no results. When searched, the third name harvested 3 pages of references, a lengthy Wikipedia article, and numerous pictures. The pictures turned out to be the man known to Small as Homer Morris. According to the Wikipedia page, Oscar Lutz presided over a privately held real estate holding company with offices in Chicago, New York, London, and Berlin. Numerous other results in his internet search revealed several articles posted by the Chicago Tribune concerning the rumored reputation of one Oscar Lutz. The public image of the man seemed to be that of a philanthropic entrepreneur. The Tribune's reporters seemed to have flushed out that Lutz had a checkered past, which he hid from the public eye at all costs. On the third page of his Google search, Small found a reference to a charity auction being hosted by Oscar Lutz and other rich individuals in the Chicago social scene. When he noticed the date of the event, he smiled. He now knew where Lutz would be and when. Without hesitation, he packed the few items he possessed and hauled them to his Honda. The 10,000-square-foot mansion near Lincoln Park provided a stunning view of Lake Michigan. The auction being held at the home of Oscar Lutz for the benefit of the homeless seemed to Shorty Small a slap in the face for those unfortunate individuals. With his experience working for a security company, he dressed in a rented tuxedo and infiltrated the event posing as part of the security detail. He stayed in the background, avoiding the real security personnel. 20 minutes after arriving, he knew where his quarry would be after the event. While the party started downstairs, he entered the private bedroom of Oscar Lutz. Patience and planning are the hallmark of a good hitman. Shorty Small possessed more than his fair share. He sat in the shadows of the bedroom in a leather wingback chair and listened to the commotion from the auction drifting up from the first floor. Time passed slowly as he stared at the bedroom door. Sounds from below grew less and less as the clock ticked toward midnight. Finally, at a few minutes past 12:30, the house grew still. A few minutes later, Small heard female giggling in a clumsy attempt to open the door. Tightening his grip on his Glock, a slight smile came to his lips. The bedroom door burst open as he heard the woman say, "I'll use the little girl's room while you make us another drink." A splendid idea. Lutz froze when he spotted the big man training the pistol on him. "Your resourcefulness has never ceased to amaze me, Mr. Small." The drunk woman looked at Shorty and then at Lutz. "Who is this person, Oscar?" "An old business acquaintance who seems to be upset about his and my last transaction." Small remained silent as he stood. Walking toward the two individuals, he motioned for them to move further into the room. He closed the bedroom door, keeping his concentration on Lutz. "I take it you found Sarah's laptop." A nod came from the big man. "I hope you've not shared it with the authorities." "Not yet." "Good. That means we can make a deal." "I doubt it. After your little stunt of posing as Homer Morris, I don't believe I can trust you." "I imagine there's a lot of information about you on it as well." "There was." "Was?" "As you have said several times, I'm a resourceful man." "Don't forget who killed Sarah Holcomb." "Yeah, there is that." Lutz frowned. The woman started to sob. Small motioned to her with the gun. "Shut her up or I will." Turning to the sobbing woman, Lutz said, "My dear, I believe it would be prudent for you to stay quiet." She nodded but continued to sniffle. Turning back to Small, the older man asked, "Now what?" "You're going to give me access to your bank accounts." Lutz smiled. "That means we can deal." "We'll see. It depends on how much money you've got." The waitress of a small diner east of Des Moines, Iowa, just off Interstate 80, set the plate of eggs and hash browns in front of Shorty Small. She said, "Can I get you anything else, hon?" Looking up, Shorty Small smiled and held up his coffee mug. "Could I get a warm-up?" "Sure, be right back." He turned his attention back to the folded Chicago Tribune laying on the table, showing the headlines on the front page. "Local philanthropist dead in murder-suicide." Chicago police are investigating the apparent murder-suicide of local businessman Oscar Lutz and his girlfriend Joyce Robinette. Evidence found in the Lincoln Park home of Lutz point to his involvement in a human sex trafficking racket and gun-for-hire scheme. Police also indicate a weapon found in the hands of Lutz is the firearm used to murder a Chicago woman 2 weeks earlier. The waitress filled his coffee mug and glanced at the headline. "He got what he deserved. I can't imagine what those poor girls went through." Looking up, he said, "Yeah, I agree with you." She walked away and he returned his attention to the newspaper. He mumbled to himself, "Guess I have to thank you, Lutz. I actually slept all night for the first time in 7 years." Shorty Small, a man neither short nor small, sat with his back against a wall in a dingy bar several blocks off Bourbon Street. He concentrated on the front door and sipped on a half-consumed bottle of Nola Blonde Ale. The din of Mardi Gras could be heard in the distance outside the establishment. The comings and goings of revelers kept the door he watched constantly opening and closing. Finally, at 10 minutes past 11 p.m., Homer LaCroix rushed through the entrance. 6'5", rail-thin, hawk nose, and long curly salt and pepper hair, the man scanned the occupants of the room. His eyes settled on Small, and he made a beeline toward the table. Small growled, "You're late." The lanky man shrugged. "So what was such an emergency? You dragged me all the way from Chicago to New Orleans." "Got a job for you, Shorty." "What kind of job?" He fished an object out of his jeans and placed it on the table. Small stared at the item and then locked eyes with the man. "What the?" "It's a silver bullet." "I can see that. Like I told you on the phone, I don't do that anymore." "I know what you said, but for $50K, I figured you'd at least think about it." Small's attention bounced from Homer to the bullet and then back at the tall man. "$50K, huh?" "Yeah, $50K. "Damn." He picked up the silver bullet and studied it closer. "At one time, you were the best hatchet man in the business." The comment went ignored as Small continued to examine the bullet. Finally, he said, "I'm not saying I will, but what do I have to do for $50K? Homer pointed toward the object. "Use that?" "I know that, asshole. Who's the mark?" "A witch." With a slow shake of his head, Small stood. "I ain't getting mixed up with that kind of nonsense, Homer. Thanks for wasting my time." "Hear me out. Isn't that what you think?" The former hitman hesitated. With a long glare at his old acquaintance, he returned to his seat. 10 minutes, then I'm out of here." Homer leaned over the table and whispered, "Voodoo in New Orleans is big business. It draws more tourists than Mardi Gras. Plus, it keeps those famous fancy restaurants from going bankrupt." "You're down to 9 minutes. Do you know much about voodoo and witches?" A shake of Small's shaggy head was the answer. "Voodoo is basically a religion brought over during the slave trade from South Africa. Those enslaved persons brought their culture from Bambara, which is now Mali, and the Kingdom of Congo, roughly where Angola is today." "Your point, Homer?" "Bear with me, Shorty. These slaves were brought over to the French colony of Louisiana. This all started in the early 18th century. The white settlers of French Louisiana were heavily Roman Catholic. During this time, the area transitioned from French to Spanish control, back to France, and then after the Louisiana Purchase, the United States. During all these changes, the two religions syncretized." Small frowned. "Huh?" "Syncretized. It means the two religions attempted to reconcile and combine with each other." "Okay." "The melting pot of Louisiana transformed the African traditions into what is now known as Louisiana voodoo. Most people think of it as a religion practiced in secret." "I thought voodoo was about sticking a pin in a doll." LaCroix smiled. "One of the myths of the religion. However, ancestors and spirit guides are essential paths of voodoo, as are spells and incantations. Voodoo queens are female religious leaders who offer guidance to believers with problems and sickness using charms, herbs, and prayers. They use ritualistic dances, songs, incantations, and beseech ancestors to ease the practitioner's particular affliction. No one has ever told me this, but I think that's why people started calling the voodoo queens witches." "Homer, this is all fascinating, but you're down to 4 minutes to sell me on this cockamamie story of yours. Shorty, my whole point boils down to this. Voodoo tourism is big business here in New Orleans. Millions of tourist dollars flow into the city coffers. Someone is trying to screw up the fun nature of voodoo by scaring potential tourists away. Small tilted his head. Okay, I just added a few minutes to your timetable. There's money involved. Big money, Shorty. He paused and smiled. Those are the so-called keepers of the faith are scared. Why? They believe a real witch is seeking revenge on the ancestors of those who persecuted her in the mid-20th century. You're kidding. No, that's why they gave me a silver bullet to be used. It's the only thing that'll kill a real witch and cleanse the earth of her presence. Rolling his eyes, the big man shook his head. Homer, someone is pulling your leg. There's no such thing as a real witch. There might be a few poor wretched souls who believe they are witches, but they're not. LaCroix leaned over the table. Who cares if the witch is real? Our employer believes she is, and is willing to pay someone $50,000 to use this silver bullet to make it go away. That someone can be you. What's your cut? I do this out of the goodness of my heart. Bullshit. Your heart is as black as mine. I'm being paid as a consultant. It's separate from the $50,000. Do they know where the witch is? No. With a chuckle, Small sat back in his chair and drained his beer. Then, how do they know it's a witch? Reaching into his pocket, LaCroix pulled out what looked to be a folded playing card. He opened and laid it on the table. This is one of the 5 tarot cards found on the desks of each member of the tourism board. No one knows how they got there, and security cameras show they suddenly appeared around midnight. Small picked up the object and studied it. A tower with lightning striking it and 2 dudes falling. So? The tower is one of the more foreboding cards in the tarot deck. It means there will be upheaval or change coming. Rolling his eyes again, Small handed the card back to LaCroix. I can't believe people fall for this crap, especially enough to spend $50,000 to stop it. You would if you knew how much money the haunted house tourist brings in. That's not the only card they've received. Everyone on the tourism board has also received a death card in the mail. They think it symbolizes the end of the tourist trade. They are quite literally pissing their pants. This seems to be something the police would need to investigate. One would think so, but the police told them, until some crime is actually committed, they aren't interested. Which brings us to the need for someone else to take care of the problem. Thus, the $50,000 and you. Small studied the bullet again, then the tarot card. I'll need more than 1 bullet. LaCroix nodded. When Shorty Small exited his hotel early the next morning, he planned to walk the streets of the French Quarter and get a feel for the area. His journey took him to Toulouse Street, where he turned left. At the intersection with Bourbon Street, he made a right. This early in the morning, he saw street cleaners hosing off the puke left behind by the previous evening's Mardi Gras participants, along with food and drink suppliers delivering product to the restaurants and bars scattered along the famous street. Making another right at Phillip Street, he looked back and noticed a woman a block behind him staring intently in his direction. Over the course of his career, as a man who handled personnel problems with a gun, his radar pinged when he saw her. Quickening his pace, he ducked into an open coffee shop. He waited for the woman to pass, but after 10 minutes, he still had not seen her. Silently chastising himself for his runaway paranoia, he ordered a coffee to go and continued his tour of the French Quarter. Turning right on Chartres Street, he reached Jackson Square and sat across from St. Louis Cathedral on a park bench. He planned to enjoy his coffee and watch the pedestrian traffic mill about. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the woman who followed him on Bourbon Street. He paid no obvious attention to her, but kept her in his peripheral vision. She remained still while he pretended to study the men, women, and children roaming the area. The distance to her location at the corner of Chartres Street and St. Anne would prevent him from catching up to her. She would have plenty of time to disappear into any local business and elude him. Standing, he found a trash receptacle to deposit his now empty coffee cup. When he looked toward the position where she last stood, the space was empty. With a frown, he jogged toward the corner and glanced up and down St. Anne Street. He saw her a block to the northwest. As he started to follow, she disappeared. He stopped, stood without moving for a few moments, and then hurried to where he last saw her. When he arrived, there were no doors, alleys, or alcoves. She had simply vanished. Turning back to return to the park bench, a black cat scurried across the street in front of him. LaCroix chuckled as Small retold the events of his morning tour in the French Quarter. "I told you she was a witch." "Witches do not exist, Homer." The thin man pushed a box of 9mm ammunition across the table. "You asked for more silver bullets. There are 25 in there, with the remaining one's hollow point." Small put his hand on the box and slipped it under the table. "Thanks. They do exist. The one spying on you may be the one causing all the trouble. Be careful out there, Shorty." "We'll see if I see her tomorrow." He paused. "Anything happened yesterday I should know about?" A slow nod from LaCroix. "They aren't sure it's related, but one of the board members of the tourism board died of a heart attack last night." "Let me guess. He was seen with a woman beforehand." "How'd you guess?" "I was joking. What'd this woman look like?" "Blonde, mid-40s, average height, and I'm told a real looker." Small stared at LaCroix for over 30 seconds. "That's how I would describe the woman who followed me yesterday." "Well, there you go, Shorty. I'd load your gun with the silver bullets immediately." "Okay, I'll take the job. Did you tell them I get half up front?" "I did." "Where is it?" A plain white business envelope appeared on the table. "There's 30K in there. With the death of McAllister, they upped the fee to 60. The envelope disappeared just like the box of ammo. Small narrowed his eyes. "How'd you know I'd take this job?" LaCroix shrugged. "After seeing the look in your eyes the other day, I figured you'd take the job." He stood. "If I were you, I'd brush up on the history of the French Quarter. It might keep you alive." With those words, he walked out of the bar. Small muttered to himself, "Way ahead of you on that one, Homer." Located on the southern edge of the French Quarter on Decatur Street, Small's hotel ranked high on the list of best hotels in New Orleans. Close to restaurants and all the cultural offerings of this section of town, it lay only a block from a jewelry, gemstones, and minerals shop that also offered psychic readings. During his walking trip on the first day, he wandered into the shop and struck up a conversation with the owner. She turned out to be not only knowledgeable on local history, but up to date on all the happenings within the local religious community, mainly voodoo. After his meeting with LaCroix, he waited around until 8 p.m. when the small shop closed. Madame Claire Honoré greeted him as he walked into the store. "Ah, Monsieur Small, I am so happy you are here. I have one customer left, and then we can talk." She hurried away while Shorty examined a display case with numerous gemstones. He heard the little bell above the door jingle, and then she returned. "I did not know if you would keep our appointment." "I have lots of questions, Madame Honoré." "Please call me Claire." He folded his arms and appraised the woman. She appeared to be in her mid to late 40s, long brown hair with a silver streak prominent on one side, hazel eyes, and a smile he found inviting. "I'm Shorty." She looked him up and down. "You are most definitely not short." He shrugged. "It's my name." Taking his arm, she guided him to a room in the back. "This is where we do our psychic readings. We use tarot cards or read palms." He glanced at her. "Do you believe in that sort of stuff?" Offering the sly smile he enjoyed, she grinned. "I don't have to believe. I just have to sell it." He chuckled. "Tell me about witches." "What kind? The Chamber of Commerce kind? The New Orleans kind? Or the ones no one should mess with kind?" Small tilted his head. "Let's start with the kind no one should mess with." That could take a while. You buying me dinner? He pointed to a ring on her left hand. What about your husband? She patted his arm as she guided him toward the store's front door. He's been gone for 10 years. I used the ring to keep the vultures away. Then I'm buying dinner. Know a good place? At breakfast the next morning in the hotel cafe, Claire Honoré finally got around to explaining more about New Orleans and witches. Shorty, this lovely city has a long history of voodoo, witches, the occult, and various other traditions passed down from the past inhabitants of the area. Most of it is harmless and helps support the local economy. That's what I've been told. She held her coffee cup with both hands. However, there is a dark side. He remained quiet as he kept his gaze on her. She continued, most witches are benevolent. Some truly believe they are witches, while others are hustlers and scam artists. After another sip of coffee, she looked up at him. The real witches are agents of the devil and will steal your soul. It is said they can take the shape of anything or any person. How do you tell if a witch has taken a new shape? Will it cackle like the ones in The Wizard of Oz? The sly smile returned as Claire shook her head. No, it is their eyes. The eyes will be a black pool, bottomless and enticing. It is the eyes that suck the soul from her victim's body. Are there any real witches here in New Orleans? There have been many over the years, not so much recently, but now. What does that mean? I am hearing rumors one has returned to seek vengeance on those that make a mockery of the ancient traditions. Do you believe it? She sipped her coffee and then studied the contents. It is inevitable. We have strayed from the real purpose of voodoo. It came about in this area to ease the burdens of the early slaves who toiled to make their masters rich. Now, those traditions have once again morphed into a system that exploits the workers and favors only a few rich men. So you think she has returned to do good? Claire shrugged. It depends on your definition of good. She paused. But no, I don't believe she has returned to do anything positive. I feel she has arrived to threaten the livelihood of those who make their living here in the French Quarter. Does that include you? She sipped her coffee and then nodded. What can stop her? With a chuckle, the store owner said, 2 things, fire or a silver bullet through her black heart. Another sip of coffee, she stared at Small. Why are you so interested? I'm curious, that's all. Shorty Small, somehow I doubt that. I saw your poem last night. You are here for a specific reason. Yes. But you will not tell me. Not right now. Someday, maybe. After Claire Honoré returned to her apartment above the store to freshen up before she opened the shop at 11 a.m., Small returned to his room in the hotel. His doubts about a real witch returning to New Orleans seeking revenge remained in place. However, after listening to Claire at dinner last night, and then again during breakfast, he retrieved the box of ammunition given to him by LaCroix and loaded a magazine with silver bullets. As he pressed the shiny objects into the black metal sleeve, he mumbled to himself, "Better to be prepared." Once he completed this chore, he returned the weapon to the inside the pants holster at his waist. At exactly noon, he walked northeast on Decatur Street until he arrived at Jackson Square. Taking the same park bench where he sat 2 days earlier, he watched the pedestrians and waited. Time passed slowly, but 40 minutes later, a tall, lanky man sat at the opposite end of the bench and said, "Any luck finding her?" "No." "Have you tried?" "I know more today than I did yesterday." "And that means?" "I'm working on it, asshole. You haven't exactly been a fountain of information." More tarot cards were found stuck to doors this morning. "Which cards?" "Mostly the Tower card, 1 death card." "Who got that one?" "It was on the mausoleum where the voodoo queen Marie Laveau is buried." "Sounds like the card's a little late." "Funny, Shorty. The problem is the cemetery is closed to the public due to all the years of vandalism. The only way to access the gravesite is during an official tour with a licensed tour guide. Okay, they slipped in after dark. LaCroix shook his head. Motion detectors and security cameras protect the property at night. The card was found this morning by a maintenance man. Just like the cards appearing on the desks, nothing showed up on the security cameras. So, what does the death card on a grave mean? I'm no expert, but I'm told it means a life-altering change is coming. Small laughed. To a grave? No, the person who spoke to me believes this is a sign the future of the French Quarter is in jeopardy. They want you to hurry and fulfill your assignment. Standing, the hitman looked down at his bench companion. I'll check out the cemetery. In the meantime, tell your bosses I make the schedule when the job is completed. No one else. If they push me, the contract will be null and void. Down payment is non-refundable. But you knew that, didn't you, Homer? A nod was his answer. The guided tour of the St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, where the mausoleum of Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau resided, lasted an hour, concluding at 5:30 in the afternoon. Small paid little attention to the tour guide as he used the time to locate the security cameras throughout the grounds. As an expert in avoiding such devices, he concluded no one would be able to get near Marie Laveau's final resting place without being seen by no less than 4 cameras. With a growing realization he might be in over his head on this assignment, he walked back toward his hotel, making a stop at Claire Honoret's gem store. When he approached the small shop, the front door stood ajar. Looking in, he saw nothing but chaos, smashed display cases, overturned shelving units, and broken glass mixed with necklaces and bracelets covering the floor. Small yelled, "Claire!" When he received no answer, he yelled it again. He heard a faint voice say, "In the back! Watch out for broken glass!" Making his way toward the rear portion of the store, he found the proprietor in the room where psychic readings took place. Zip ties held her legs and wrists to a captain's chair. She looked up at him. "It's a mess out there, isn't it?" Hurrying to her, he used a pocket knife to cut her bindings. She stood and hugged him. "Thanks, you're the first person to come by since this happened." "Who?" "Never seen her before. Blonde, mid-40s, average height, and very pretty. I didn't hear the bell on the door. It tells me when someone enters the shop. I was redoing a display. When I turned, there she stood next to me. She scared me, Shorty." "Her?" "The one we talked about this morning. The eyes, they were black as coal and her breath smelled of sulfur." "What did she say?" "She didn't. She swept her arms around in the air, and all the damage you see out there occurred. She pushed me into this room, and that's all I remember until I heard you calling my name." "Where's your front door key?" She pulled a set out of her jeans pockets and handed it to him. When he returned, he said, "You need to call the police." She shook her head. "Won't do any good. They won't believe me." "Just tell them a bunch of druggies broke in and did it. That way the insurance company will have a police report to work with." She tilted her head to the side. "I'm impressed, Mr. Small. Are you a former cop?" "No, but I've dealt with the police before. They'll buy the story about a break-in." Claire folded her arms. "She knows I spoke to you last night." "Who knows?" "The witch you're chasing." "Hard to chase someone you've never seen." "Figure of speech, Shorty." "I know. You sure she just waved her arms?" "Positive." Small looked at all the damage. "Call the police. I'll stick around and make sure they take you seriously." After the police finished taking pictures and asking questions, they left, and Small escorted Claire up the back staircase to her apartment. Nothing seemed out of place. He said, "Make sure nothing is missing." She glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "Make sure she didn't come up here and take something personal." "Like what?" "I don't know, a hairbrush or something like that." With a frown, Claire walked toward a closed door and entered the room. She reemerged holding a brown object. Here's my brush. Good. Look for anything you've used personally. She tapped her foot. Are you telling me you believe she's a witch? I'm not saying anything. Just look for something personal missing. She went through another door into what Small could see contained a bed. 10 minutes later, she emerged, her eyes wide. Shorty, your t-shirt I wore home last night is missing. The stillness on the streets of the French Quarter seemed out of place as Small returned to his hotel room just before dawn the next morning. When he entered his room, he half expected it to be trashed like Claire's small store. However, nothing seemed out of place. After placing a Do Not Disturb sign on his hotel room doorknob, he stripped and took a long hot shower. Emerging minutes later, a towel wrapped around his waist, he stopped suddenly at the sight of a blonde woman standing in the middle of his hotel room. Her eyes appraised him. Monsieur Small, why do you seek me out? You've caught me at a disadvantage. I don't know your name. Because I did not give it to you. Her accent was French, the voice slightly hoarse. Now, why do you seek me out? I've been offered a contract to find you. And kill me? He shrugged. I haven't yet, have I? No. She tilted her head and walked toward the door. You have no idea of what you are involved with. Care to enlighten me? Her hand touched the doorknob and she turned to look at him. No, you need to discover it yourself. What you find could shake the very foundation of who you believe yourself to be. With a smile, she dissolved into a blue mist. It rose and disappeared into the air vent above the door. The tightness in his stomach caused him to hurry to the closet. He checked his Glock 19. It remained where he left it before his shower. Taking the weapon from the holster, he ejected the magazine and checked the number of rounds. None were missing. He carried it back to the bathroom. Who the hell sent you to hire me, Homer? LaCroix raised his hands, palms toward the man sitting across from him. Easy, Shorty. What happened? A blonde bitch with black eyes is what happened. Raising his eyebrows, the skinny man lowered his hands. You saw her? In the middle of my hotel room. She was there, then she wasn't. What do you mean? She was there, then oof, she wasn't. Did she call you by name? Yes. Damn. Who is she? Closing his eyes, LaCroix scowled. She knows why you're here. Obviously. He folded his arms. When she disappeared on the street the other day, did you see anything strange? No, just a black cat. Oh dear. What the hell does that mean? Not a good sign. I'll be leaving today. I told you I was done with the business. You've successfully convinced me I should have stayed retired. You can't. I can. They'll want their money back. Like I told you, Homer, no refunds. Besides, I have expenses. LaCroix examined the hitman. Did she scare you? Small stared at the thin man. Scare? No. Convince me you haven't been telling me the truth? Yes. They'll send someone to collect. LaCroix, you haven't been listening, have you? No refunds. The next messenger won't be as easy to get along with. I can be the same way, remember? The thin man nodded. They don't like people who fail at assignments. What's that mean? Probably the last time you'll see me. Good, I didn't want to see you this time. No, I mean, I'll be taken into the swamp and fed to the gators. No one will find a body. Small rolled his eyes. Really, Homer? You're giving me a sob story? It's not a sob story. It's a fact and it will happen. Small took a calming breath. Well, we can't have that. He narrowed his eyes. Don't you think it's time you told me the truth? I did. He paused for a second. I might have left out a few details, but people who hired me are really scared about the appearance of a new witch. What'd you leave out? Taking a deep breath, LaCroix let it out slowly. It has to do with money. It always does. Yeah, but I'm talking millions of dollars. Small glared at his friend. The powers that be like the way the current system works. The tourist industry generates revenue for the area, and each of the businesses within the French Quarter pays their fair share to the tourist board. Voluntarily, or is there an enforcement squad? The latter. Thought so. And some of the local businesses don't like it. With a nod, LaCroix continued. The tourism board got greedy and raised the percentage businesses have to pay a year ago. A lot of the business owners banded together and found a way to fight it. A witch? Yeah, they used black magic and conjured up a witch. Small laughed out loud and shook his head. You don't need me, Homer. All of you need a trip to the psych ward. You're all crazy. That's why they had the silver bullets made. You've seen her disappear. You know she's real. I don't know how she did it, but it's not black magic. There's no such thing. The thin man shrugged. Others think different. I'll prove it by finding her. I'll prove she's a fake and you guys can pay me the rest of the money. They just want her gone. After his meeting with LaCroix, Small stopped by Claire's shop to see if she needed any help cleaning up the small store. When he arrived, he saw the sign indicating the shop would be closed for remodeling. He tried the doorknob and found it open. Stepping in, he discovered the shop in the same state of chaos as the night before. Claire? He waited. No response. Stepping in, he called her name again. Claire? Still silence. He climbed the stairs in the back toward the apartment and knocked on the door. No response. Taking a slim tool out of his billfold, he unlocked the door and stepped in. Claire, it's Shorty. Silence. With his concern growing, he took the stairs back down 2 at a time and hurried to the seance room. Empty. He turned toward the front door and saw the blonde woman. He said, What have you done with Claire? She's gone. I can see that. Where? Away. Small withdrew the Glock from his concealed holster and pointed it at the specter. I don't know who you are and quite frankly don't care. I do care about Claire. Now where is she? The woman fixed her coal black eyes on Small. She's where you'll never find her. My patience has limits, lady. You shoot me with a silver bullet and you'll never find her. Sounds like we have a stalemate. Yes. You first. Leave New Orleans and Madame Honoré will be free. I have a counter-proposal for you. Let her go and I won't shoot you. The response from the blonde woman surprised Small. She cackled like a witch from a Hollywood movie. He shook his head and leveled the gun at her heart. Was that supposed to scare me? She frowned and backed up toward the front door. Slowly, at first, she quickened her pace and said, The one you seek is unconscious and weak. Find her you must, before the end of dusk. Just as she reached it, the door opened by itself. Emitting another cackle, she stepped onto the sidewalk and vanished. Damn! Small ran to the still open door and stepped outside the shop. He looked up and down Charta Street. The woman was nowhere to be seen. He turned to look at the building and noticed another floor above Claire's apartment. Dashing back into the shop, he took the stairs 2 at a time to her apartment. Inside, he hurried from one room to the next. When he entered the kitchen, he noticed a door on the far side of the room. Claire was indeed unconscious and unresponsive. The paramedics loaded her into the ambulance, and within seconds, the siren spooled up as it accelerated south toward Decatur Street. He turned to a police officer who had responded along with the ambulance to his 911 call and asked, Where are they taking her? University Medical Center. It's over on Canal Street. Small nodded. The officer looked around the shop. You were here yesterday, weren't you? Yes. Want to tell me why you're here again? I came by to see if she needed help cleaning up. Doesn't look like she got much done. When did you last see her? Small turned his attention to the policeman. When I left? The officer's hand slowly moved toward his service weapon. Noting the cop moving his hand, Small said, "After you guys left last night, I made sure she was okay before leaving. I made her some tea and stayed with her until she fell asleep. It was somewhere around 4 in the morning. His hand returned to a neutral position. "You from around here?" "No, I'm here on business." "Want to tell me more about this blonde woman you mentioned?" Small debated with himself about how much to tell the officer. Finally, he said, "Not much to tell. When I first got here, the place was empty. I went up and checked Claire's apartment. I didn't know about the 3rd floor at that time. When I came back down, she was standing in the middle of the shop." "Did she tell you where Ms. Honoré was?" "Yes." "So you think she's the one who assaulted her?" "Yes." The officer nodded. "Where are you staying?" He gave the cop his hotel's address and told him where he lived in Chicago. After the man left, he locked the front door to the shop and started walking toward the hospital. Small stood at the side of Claire's hospital bed and looked down at her. She glanced up and said, "What's happened, Shorty?" "I was hoping you could tell me, Claire." "All I remember is I slept until noon. After a few cups of coffee, I went down to the shop and placed a sign on the front door about being closed for a few days. Then I woke up here." She paused for a moment. "They told me if I hadn't been found, I probably wouldn't have made it." He frowned. "Did they say why?" "No, just that I had a weak pulse and low blood oxygen." She reached for his hand and held it. "A nurse told me a friend found me. That friend was you, wasn't it?" He nodded. "Thank you. I was on the 3rd floor, wasn't I?" "Yes." "I have rarely ventured up there. Too dark and spooky." "What's this witch got against you, Claire?" "I have no idea." Small crossed his arms. "They're going to let you go home here soon. Why don't you stay with me at the hotel tonight? I can look around the shop tomorrow and see if I can find any clues who this blonde woman might be." She squeezed his hand. "I like that idea." Using a flashlight purchased before he ventured up to the 3rd floor, Small swept the beam around the cluttered area. Claire followed him into the room. "I've never really been up here much, Shorty. The wiring is messed up, which means no lights. Since I don't need the room, I've never made the repairs." He looked at her and frowned. "You own the building?" "Yeah." She paused. "Actually, I inherited it from my grandmother. She was the one who started the gem shop. I worked there until she died. I moved in and took over the shop." "You know the history of the building?" She shook her head. He turned his attention back to the contents of the 3rd floor. He moved further into the darkness, and his flashlight shone on a brick wall. "Is there a room behind this wall, Claire?" "I have no idea." He detected a strained tone to her voice. Turning, he pointed the flashlight back at her and found she stood with her arms folded, shivering. "You cold?" "All of a sudden, I'm freezing." He walked back to stand beside her. A distant cold air pocket hung over the area. He heard a loud noise behind him. Pointing the flashlight toward the sound, he watched a door open in the wall. A figure emerged with a brilliant halo surrounding it. Claire screamed, and Shorty Small did what Shorty Small did best. He retrieved the Glock from his concealed holster, pointed it at the figure, and started squeezing the trigger. Homer LaCroix handed the envelope with the additional $30,000 to Shorty Small. "The powers that be are very pleased with the outcome, my friend." "Good. I like satisfied clients." He tilted his head. "You in good standing with them?" "Extremely. They like your style and asked me to see if you would move to New Orleans. They have, possible other projects for you. Your moving expenses would be picked up, of course." "Really? Let me think about it. I bet Claire would like for you to move." "She would." "Then what do you say?" "I'll think about it." "She doing okay?" "Yes, thanks for asking." "When did you figure out the witch lived on the 3rd floor of her building?" "The first time I saw the place, I didn't notice the 3rd floor, almost like it didn't exist. The night I found Claire, I stood outside and noticed there was another floor above her apartment. I honestly don't remember seeing it before. I found the staircase to it behind a door in her kitchen. How many did you find? The blonde bitch with the black eyes was there. Not sure how many others. As soon as I shot her, she shrieked and dissolved into a puddle of water. The others disappeared. What happened to the water? Small gave LaCroix a half smile, sopped it up with a towel, then burned it. Does Claire know anything? Nah, she passed out when the door opened. She inherited the building from her grandmother, who I discovered after a trip to the library was a well-known voodoo queen before the turn of the century. I also found a picture of the woman in a digital copy of a newspaper. Oh, yeah, blonde and a pretty woman. Are you telling me? Yeah, the witch was Claire's grandmother. Claire doesn't know that, so keep your mouth shut. Why? Think about it. Would you want to know your grandmother tried to kill you? LaCroix smiled and nodded. He tilted his head. There's always something going on around here that needs someone with your talent. Why don't you say goodbye to Chicago and join us down here? The big man was quiet for a few moments. He pursed his lips. Yeah, Chicago doesn't hold that many good memories for me. Guess if a hurricane comes, I can always head north. Shorty Small, a man neither short nor small, entered the coffee shop, surveyed the patrons, and found who he sought. Homer LaCroix sat in a corner table munching on a beignet with a mug of coffee in his right hand. When he approached the table, he growled, "What's so damn important? You dragged me down here at 7 in the morning." Raising the sweet pastry, Homer said, "Have you tried one of their beignets?" "I just moved here. I didn't know the place existed. And what the hell is a beignet?" "You haven't experienced New Orleans until you tried one of these. Sit, I'll order you one." LaCroix searched the room and caught the eye of one of the cafe's waitresses. He pointed to his coffee and held up his pastry. He then nodded at Small. "Shouldn't be too long. I told her you'd be joining me." "Homer, you're in New Orleans now, Shorty. You've got to learn to relax. How was the move?" "Wonderful. If you enjoy realizing all your worldly possessions fit into the back of an SUV. Where are you staying?" "At the moment, Claire's." LaCroix tilted his head. "At the moment?" "That's what I said." The waitress set a mug of coffee and the beignet in front of Small and walked away without saying a word. Small took a bite and raised his eyebrows. LaCroix smiled. "Good, aren't they?" "First thing you've been right about this morning, so why the early meeting?" Fishing a folded piece of paper out of his jacket pocket, LaCroix laid it in front of the big man. "Ever see anything like this?" Taking the page, Small studied it as he wiped powdered sugar off his lips with a napkin. "It's a walking stick, so?" "What else do you see?" "It's an ornately carved cane with a handle resembling a cobra about to strike. Get to the point, Homer." The tall, lanky man withdrew another picture from his jacket pocket. "Recognize this guy?" Small nodded. "Who wouldn't? He's an action movie star. I've seen most of his films, although nothing lately." "Well, he won't be making any more." Raising his head from studying the photo, Small appraised LaCroix. "What's that supposed to mean?" "He's dead." "He's probably old, too." "Mid-60s. Healthy and negotiating a new movie. He died of a snake bite. King cobra venom, according to the autopsy." Small rolled his eyes. "Homer, there aren't any wild king cobras in Louisiana, or the United States for that matter. They're native to India." "I'm aware of that." Studying the picture of the walking stick again and then the picture of the actor, Small shook his head slowly. "Please don't tell me the cane did it." LaCroix shrugged. "It's New Orleans." "That's not an answer." "What do the police say?" "They're washing their hands of it. The detective I spoke to said it probably got loose from its owner, whoever that might be. The cops aren't concerned? No. Where'd the actor get the walking stick? That's what the tourism board wants you to find out. Thought they were going to pay for my move here. A slightly over 1-inch thick envelope appeared on the table. LaCroix scooted it across the surface toward Small. 30,000, 10 for your move, and 20 as a retaining fee. The envelope disappeared under the table. Where's the cane? Never found. Small's mouth twitched. Then how did they know he owned one? Receipt found in his apartment. Did someone let a snake loose in his place in order to steal the walking stick? LaCroix shrugged. That's what you're supposed to determine. With a slight shake of his head, Small stood. For $20,000, I'll look into it. He turned to walk out of the cafe but stopped. The pastry was good, thanks. Claire Honoré stood behind the cash wrap and smiled as Shorty Small walked through the front door of her newly remodeled jewelry, gemstones, and minerals shop located in the French Quarter. Hi, what did Homer want? After kissing her, he showed her the picture of the cane. Ever see one of these before? Her eyes widened as she took in the photo. What's wrong, Claire? Tell me you didn't buy one. I didn't. What's the matter? They're from India and are believed to be cursed. They? How many of these are there? Too many. That didn't answer my question. What do you know about these things? Claire grew quiet for a few moments. She pursed her lips. Let's close the shop and get some coffee next door. It's complicated. With a mug of coffee cradled in her hand and sitting in a far corner of the small cafe, Claire looked at Small and sighed. It all started with a man named David Allen. He was born in 1925 and learned to whittle as a young boy. After a heart attack in the 1960s, he got serious about changing his hobby into something more lucrative. He gave away his early canes to local people who couldn't afford to buy one. Then he started selling them. He was a kind-hearted, good man. Then in 1981, he and his wife went to Washington, D.C. to participate in the Festival of American Folklife sponsored by the Smithsonian. During his visit to the festival, a man named Edgar Lort became fascinated at the walking sticks produced by David. Lort returned to New Orleans and set up a shop specializing in hand-carved walking sticks. He bought many from David Allen, but most of the ones occupying his shop came from all over the world. After taking a sip of coffee, Small said, Let me guess, he imported a bunch of canes from India. Claire nodded. I was joking. She gave him a grim smile. I'm not. In fact, he brought in 8 canes, all of similar design. One of those walking sticks was the one in the picture you showed me. From where? Somewhere in India. He never would tell me the exact location. I need to talk to this Lort character. That will be difficult. Small smiled. Why? He died by snakebite just before New Year's Day in 2015. The cobra canes were discovered locked in a gun safe. How do you know so much about them? A shrug became his answer. Claire? I met Edgar at a Chamber of Commerce function when I first took over the shop. He told me all about his searches for the oddest and more unique walking sticks. He was a strange fellow and just as odd-looking. Your friend Homer LaCroix reminds me a lot of him. Yeah, Homer is a strange-looking dude. What happened to Lort's store? To my knowledge, he was heavy in debt. His bank took possession of the shop after he died and liquidated the inventory. To who? No one knows. It was done in secret. One day all of his inventory was in the shop. The next day, the building was empty with a for lease sign on it. Huh. Shorty, please don't get mixed up with this. There is some serious evil surrounding those cobra walking sticks. Claire, you know I don't believe in all that crap. What about my grandmother, the witch? Small shrugged. Can't explain it, but I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Yes, there is. She was a witch. After giving her a half grin, he continued. Who would know more about the inventory? I suspect the bank. Which one? Bank of Louisiana. The one on St. Charles? She nodded. I'll check with them today. Claire continued to stare at the coffee in her mug. Don't worry, Claire. Nothing's going to happen. She snapped her head up and glared at Small. You don't know that. You're getting involved with something that should be left alone. And for what? Your curiosity? No, for $20,000. The glare softened. Just be careful. Always. Bank of Louisiana Vice President Justin Woodward gestured to the seat in front of his desk. Please have a seat, Mr. Small. What can I do for you today? I'm looking into a matter for the tourism board. Ah, then how can I help you? Small pulled the picture of the cobra walking stick out of his jacket pocket and laid it in front of the banker. Supposedly, there might have been as many as 8 canes like this one in Lort's inventory the night the bank seized his store after his death. The tourism board would like to know where they went. Placing half-readers on his nose, Woodward picked up the picture and studied the cane. I remember them. I was just starting with the bank back then, and one of my first assignments was taking inventory of his shop. Do you remember what happened to them? Let me think. He kept the picture in his hand as he grew silent. After a minute, he laid it down on the desktop and started typing on his computer keyboard. He then studied the screen. It seems we consigned the entire lot of inventory to an auction house in Dallas. He stared at the screen for a few more moments, frowned, and started typing again. Removing his glasses, he returned his attention to Small. There is no record of the Cobra walking sticks being transferred to the auction house. Which means? It means if I hadn't remembered them, this would never have been discovered. They may have been stolen. Does the bank have records of them being inventoried the night of the seizure? Woodward started typing on his keyboard again. He then ran his fingers down the screen as if checking a list. His fingers stopped halfway down and he frowned. Oh dear. Did you find them? Yes, they were checked in, but did not make it to the auction house. What happened in between is the question. That was over a decade ago, isn't it, Mr. Woodward? Yes, we may never know what happened. Small raised an eyebrow. Was the inventory appraised prior to being sent to the auction house? If it was, I wasn't told. Is this the first time a discrepancy has been discovered? As far as I know it is. I was transferred out of that department before the auction house took possession of the inventory. Can you recall who might have had access back then? No, sorry. Standing, Small offered his hand. Thank you for your time. Woodward mindlessly shook it, but kept his attention on his computer screen. Parked behind the bank where Small figured the bank employees kept their cars, he waited. At precisely 4:35 p.m., Justin Woodward exited the back door of the bank. With a hurried pace and eyes glued to a new BMW X5, the man unlocked the door and slipped into the driver's seat. A minute later, Small observed the back lights flare, the luxury SUV backed out of its parking space and screeched out of the lot. Following the bank executive through the heavy afternoon traffic in New Orleans did not impose a problem for Small. Having followed numerous marks over the years allowed him to perfect his technique. The bank vice president did not hurry but seemed to hesitate at one corner. Just as the light turned to yellow, he sped through the intersection. Small did not panic. As soon as the light changed in his favor again, he increased his speed until he saw the BMW 5 cars ahead stopped at another light. With a slight smile, he settled in and continued to follow Woodward. After 40 minutes of negotiating the streets of the Big Easy, the BMW emerged onto West Interstate 10. Small kept back as the two vehicles traveled west out of the city. An hour and a half later, the BMW pulled into the parking lot of a warehouse on the outskirts of Baton Rouge. Driving past, he noted the name and pulled over a half mile further on. Using his cell phone, he entered a Google search of the place. The results came back as a private warehouse owned by an LLC. An additional search of the Louisiana Secretary of State's office told Shorty Small the warehouse served as the headquarters for an organization dedicated to the preservation of Louisiana culture. With a smile growing the more he read, he put his Ford Escape in gear and headed back to New Orleans. The next day, after spending the morning chasing business names, aliases, and doing business as statements, Shorty Small knew more about the financial holdings of Bank of Louisiana Vice President Justin Woodward. While all of the entities he identified appeared legitimate, the former hitman smelled blood in the water, so to speak. Something was off. His next step would be to find out more about the walking sticks. At 4 p.m., a graduate student at Tulane University escorted Small to the office of Carmen Fowler, Ph.D. After introductions, the graduate student left and Dr. Fowler smiled. "What can I help you with, Mr. Small?" "For starters, call me Shorty." "Very well. Do you have a question about anthropology?" Removing the picture of the cobra walking stick, he laid it on top of the conference table where they sat. She raised an eyebrow as she picked up the photo. "Are you in possession of this artifact, Shorty?" "No, I've been asked to look into its importance." "I see." She studied the picture for a few moments, stood, and went to a bookshelf next to her desk. She bent over and removed a book from the shelf. Flipping through it, she then returned to the table. Placing the book so Small could see the page, she tapped on a picture. "If I'm not mistaken, it's the same object." With a nod, Small looked at the professor and then lifted the cover of the book. The author was Carmen Fowler. Apparently, I am speaking to someone who knows what they're talking about." She leaned back and folded her arms. "Who's asking you to look into its importance?" "I'm an investigator for the tourism board." "Ah." With a smile, she reached for the book and flipped to another page. "In the beginning, there were 10 of them. Not identical, but similar in design. They were all handmade in northeastern India during World War II in a secluded village called Mayong. According to legend, when the Japanese tried to invade India, they sent an expeditionary force as far as the Brahmaputra River where the village is located. Not long afterwards, Japan withdrew and concentrated more on their Burma campaign. 8 canes are said to have survived the encounter with the Japanese." "Is there a connection with the Japanese withdrawing and the canes?" "Legend tells us 2 of the walking sticks were given as gifts to the Japanese generals. Both died under mysterious circumstances." "Let me guess, snake bites." The professor's smile disappeared. "Yes, and those 2 walking sticks were never found." "Do you believe these objects are cursed, Professor Fowler?" Her gaze went from her visitor's face to the picture in her book and then back at the retired hitman. "There are a lot of mysterious events over the course of human history, many of which are hard to explain, Shorty. The city of Mayong is nicknamed the Land of Black Magic. Whether that is true is hard to determine, but once the Japanese encountered the people of the city, they quickly withdrew from India and concentrated their efforts elsewhere. Those facts alone could lead one to speculate." "Speculate what, Professor?" "While the Japanese had difficulties with supply lines stretching into India during World War II, the Cobra walking sticks may have been one of the reasons for the Japanese finally abandoning their goals in India." The next morning, Shorty Small fell into step with Justin Woodward as he walked through the bank's parking lot. Glancing at his walking companion, the banker said, "I'm extremely busy today, Mr. Small." "That's okay. I just thought you'd appreciate an update on what the tourism board discussed last night at their meeting." "Why would I care?" "Your name came up several times." Woodward stopped and turned toward Small. "Why would my name come up?" "They might be under the impression you are the owner of a warehouse in Baton Rouge that supplied a particularly rare walking stick to a high-end men's wear boutique. The shop then sold it to a well-known actor. The actor died under mysterious circumstances." The banker's eyes widened suddenly and then he frowned. "Even if I knew what you were talking about, I don't see how it would involve me." "It normally wouldn't, but you see, the walking stick was one of 7 canes seized by your bank that disappeared before they could be sent to an auction house in Dallas. Are you accusing me of stealing them, Mr. Small? No, I'm just an investigator. I report to the tourism board. Woodward stared at Small for several moments. I'm late. If you have something else to say, make an appointment. I'll be reporting to work now. As the banker turned and hurried toward the building's rear entrance, Small said, Don't be surprised if the tourism board spoke to the bank's president early this morning. This statement only made the man walk faster. The time approached 10 a.m. After getting a cup of coffee and waiting in his vehicle in the back of the parking lot, Small watched as Justin Woodward exited the bank, a white box in his arms and a scowl on his face. A bank security guard followed 5 paces behind. Once they were several yards past the entrance, the guard stopped following and watched the ex-vice president unlock his BMW. He immediately returned to the bank's interior. Starting the engine of his Ford, Small waited for the luxury SUV to pull out of the parking lot before he followed. Keeping track of Woodward did not create too many challenges for Small. The ex-banker stopped at a liquor store several blocks from his apartment. He spent less than 2 minutes in the store before coming out with a brown paper bag containing his purchase. The shape reminded Small of some of his own purchases in liquor stores over the years. When Woodward parked his BMW in the apartment's parking lot, he hurried to his door on the first floor. Small glanced at his wristwatch, smiled, and settled back to wait. At 12:23 p.m., a Domino's pizza delivery car parked in an empty slot next to the BMW. The driver pulled an insulated bag out of the back seat and hurried toward the apartment. Small exited his vehicle and rushed toward the now open apartment door. He approached the space from the side, and just before Woodward could shut it, Small pushed the entry open, shoving the banker backward. He stumbled and the pizza flew from his hands. It skidded across the living room floor, leaving cheese, pepperoni, and sauce smeared on the carpet. Woodward slurred his words. What the hell are you doing here? Get out! Small withdrew his Glock 19 from his waistband, pointed it at Woodward, and growled, Shut up. The prone man stared up at the larger man, his eyes bulging. What do you want? Where are the walking sticks you stole? Raising to a knee, Woodward shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. He tried to stand, but Small swept his legs out from under him, and he fell back, hitting his head hard on the floor. Stay down. He paused and walked toward the kitchen. A breakfast bar separated the two spaces. There he found a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Scotch with a third of its contents missing. A crystal highball glass next to it held ice cubes and half a glass of the amber liquid. Small picked up the glass and sniffed. There appeared to be little or no water mixed with the liquor. A little early to be drinking this shit straight, isn't it, Justin? Raising to an elbow, the younger man directed his gaze toward the ex-hitman. Mind your own fucking business. You caused me to lose my job. Wrong assessment, Justin. I didn't steal the walking sticks and then wait almost 10 years before selling one to a retail store. That one's on you. Not the brightest strategy, I might add. Woodward did not respond to the comment. Where are the rest of them? What? Small shook his head and walked back to the man now leaning on one elbow. With a swift kick, Woodward's head once again struck the carpet. Not as hard this time, but he stayed down. Now, Mr. Ex-Banker, I will ask this one more time. Where are the remaining walking sticks? Staring at the ceiling, the man folded his arms. I really don't know. Jeez, you don't have all your oars in the water, do you, dumbass? Small now stood above Woodward's head and screwed a suppressor into the barrel of the Glock. He then pointed it at the man's forehead. My patience is waning, Justin. Want to answer my question? But you're a cop. Never said I was. The man squeezed his eyes shut. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's pretty much what you're in right now. Don't make it deeper. Tell me where the walking sticks are. We sold all them. How much? Don't lie.
15,000 each.
Small gave a small whistle. Damn, Woodward. No wonder you bought a BMW. Who'd you sell them to?
I don't remember.
Small pulled the slide back on the gun.
Don't.
Who?
A collector who owns a plantation in Natchitoches, about 250 miles from here.
Natchitoches? Where's that?
Northwest of Lafayette.
Rolling his eyes, Small gritted his teeth and snarled, "Where the fuck is Lafayette?" Woodward, his eyes still closed, moaned,
"West of Baton Rouge. Follow I-49 out of Lafayette."
"What's the guy's name?" The ex-banker told him. Small new apartments, like the one he stood in, were built on concrete slabs in swampy states like southern Louisiana, so he aimed the gun to the left of Woodward's head and pulled the trigger. The sound, no louder than dropping a book on a table, scared the man laying on the carpet. He screamed as pieces of the shattered bullet burned into his cheek. At the same time, the ex-hitman noticed a dark stain spreading at the ex-banker's crotch. "It's hard to miss at this distance, Justin. Next time, I won't." The drive northwest took over 4 hours. When he arrived at the plantation, he drove by the entrance at a reduced speed. Numerous signs warned about trespassing with a reference to a local ordinance and the penalties associated with such a transgression. With the sun setting in the west, Small found a local hotel 2 miles from the palatial southern mansion. There he used his laptop to do as much research as possible about the owner. The plantation, known locally as the Barton House, possessed an interesting history dating back to its construction in 1832. Over the course of the next 20 years, the owner continued to buy more land and extend his cotton empire to over 6,000 acres. By the time the Civil War broke out in the eastern states, the Barton House cultivated one of the largest cotton harvests in the state of Louisiana. Over 200 enslaved persons toiled in the fields of this massive undertaking. The period after the war saw the plantation shrink in landmass, but not in importance to the local economy. Small discovered the current occupant could trace his ancestry back to the original owners of the land. He was not only rich, but it was old wealth, and he possessed a passion for old antiques and items associated with the mystical history of Louisiana. He also learned the man preferred to seclude himself within the plantation property and seldom ventured out. Plus, he rarely received guests or visitors. Shorty Small planned to intrude on the recluse's privacy a few minutes after midnight. During his years as a hitman, Small learned numerous techniques on how to detect alarms and intruder prevention measures. He found none on his nocturnal trek to the Barton House. A full moon provided sufficient light so as not to need his night vision goggles. From what he could see, the structure needed extensive maintenance and a heavy dose of TLC. He entered the house after finding a rear door unlocked. This gave him pause as he extracted his Glock from his shoulder holster and proceeded with additional care. The interior resembled the exterior with a serious need for a remodel. In each room he found scattered clutter, cabinet doors hanging by one hinge, the sour odor of human urine, and the sound of scurrying critters. To help him avoid stumbling over debris or animals, he extracted a small high-powered LED flashlight. Halfway to the front of the house, he detected the distinct smell of death. He emerged into an atrium near the front entrance. A male body sat on the floor, its back propped against a wall near the main door. The face appeared as if contorted in pain. The eyes were open and stared sightlessly at a point near the ceiling 2 floors above it. Small examined the body closer. As he swept the narrow beam of the flashlight over the man, he noticed 2 puncture wounds on his right hand near the joint between his thumb and index finger. The wounds were swollen, with purplish skin surrounding the puncture marks. He took a picture of the wound with his cell phone and exited the house through the front door. By noon the same day, he was back in New Orleans and showing the picture of the puncture wounds to Claire. "What do those look like to you?" She looked at the picture, frowned, and then led Small to the rear of her small jewelry and gem store. Looking at a bookshelf in her office, she extracted a book, leafed through it, stopped on a page, and handed the open volume to Small.
It looks like this made the wound.
The picture she handed him was of an ornately decorated walking stick with an intricately carved snake head. With a tight smile, Small rubbed the back of his neck.
Come on, Claire, we've discussed this before. You can't be serious.
Oh, but I am, Shorty. She took the book back and flipped through more pages.
There are multiple examples of similar incidents having occurred before, only the object in question was a spear, not a walking stick.
She stopped on a page and handed the book back to Small. Once again, he turned his attention to the open page before him.
Damn.
She only nodded. Okay, let's say I'm leaning toward believing you. How do I fight these things?
That would be beyond my knowledge. You would need to consult someone who practices hoodoo.
Hoodoo?
Yes, voodoo is a religion. Hoodoo, on the other hand, is more concerned with folklore and mysticism. A hoodoo practitioner often sees hoodoo as a sort of personal power using their knowledge of herbs, minerals, and animals. With this knowledge and power, a practitioner can assist someone in a variety of situations, including luck, love, evil, or any particular retaliation against an enemy.
Ah, geez, Claire, where am I going to find someone like that? She handed him a business card.
This is the address of someone who might know more than I do.
After studying the card, he looked up at her. Madame Toussaint?
You pronounce her last name as Toussaint.
Oh.
It is important you remember that. She gets upset if you pronounce it differently.
Then she needs to spell it like it sounds.
It's French, Shorty.
Whatever. An elderly woman opened the door of a small house on the edge of the French Quarter. Small said, Madame Toussaint?
Yes.
I'm Shorty Small. I called earlier for an appointment.
Yes, Mr. Small. Come in.
Walking into the small, cramped living room, Small felt a momentary sensory overload. Every possible empty spot along 3 walls were covered by tapestries swirling with deep purples, golds, and reds. Intricate hemp-colored macrame wall hangings hung from various hooks on the ceiling. Along the remaining wall, there stood a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf which held so many volumes the wood in the middle seemed to sag. In the center of the cluttered room sat an intricately carved wood floor table surrounded by colorful pillows and rugs.
Madame Toussaint said, Please sit and I will try to answer your questions.
Small felt like a giant in a land of gnomes as he struggled to get comfortable on the floor. When his host settled across from him, he opened the book Claire gave him to the page with the picture of the walking stick. What can you tell me about these, Madame Toussaint? She took the book and placed half-readers, which hung by a lanyard around her neck, on her nose. After she studied the picture, she closed the book, looked up at Small, and handed it back to him.
Do you seek answers of what this is, or do you seek knowledge about their purpose?
Purpose, Madame Toussaint.
These are not hoodoo, Mr. Small. They are far more sinister.
What are they used for?
They are called assassin's canes. Have you ever heard of those, Mr. Small?
Yes. Some have a hidden sword within the shaft. I've seen some that were hollow and used as a blowgun to fire poison darts. A few possessed a heavy grip made of lead and used as a bludgeon.
Very good. The one in the picture you showed me has the same purpose, to eliminate one's enemies.
How did the ones in the picture work? Her eyes narrowed.
The ones you speak of are rare. I know of only a handful imported from India. They disappeared years ago.
I know of 2 men who recently purchased similar ones and both died of a snake bite. One of her hands shot up to cover her mouth.
Oh dear, where?
One here in New Orleans and another in Natchitoches.
There were rumors of 7. Do you know where the remaining 5 might be?
Small shook his head.
You are trying to find them for the tourism board, aren't you, Mr. Small?
Trying not to show his surprise at how Madame Toussaint knew of his mission, He only nodded.
These walking sticks are a danger to anyone who holds them by the grip.
How? A small smile came to her lips.
They are petrified king cobras, Mr. Small. Once someone claims them, they will revert to their original form and attack anyone holding the cane. Normally, the wound is fatal, as you have mentioned.
You're kidding, right?
No, Mr. Small, I am not.
So you're saying don't touch them by the grip?
Not if you want to live.
Justin Woodward unlocked his apartment door and opened it. Before he could step in, a strong hand in the middle of his back pushed him. He stumbled and fell forward, his nose making direct contact with the living room floor. Blood gushed as he screamed.
What the hell?
Shorty Small closed and locked the front door, making sure the deadbolt was fully engaged. He waited, his Glock now pointed at the prone, bleeding man. When the ex-banker looked up, he screamed,
You! I'm gonna sue you for assault! You're a dangerous man!
Small gave the man a slight smile. You have no idea. Now where are the remaining Cobra walking sticks?
I told you, we sold them to a collector in Natchitoches.
He's dead. Death by snake bite. Woodward's eyes widened.
How?
You obviously didn't know what you had, did you, Justin?
What do you mean?
Those walking sticks were originally from a village in India. From what I've been able to discover, they are petrified king cobras and designed to be assassin's canes, lethal to anyone who possesses them. Now, want to tell me where they are, or do you want to be charged with murder of 2 men, one of which was a famous actor? Woodward stood and went to the kitchen and found a towel to press against his still bleeding nose.
You fucking broke my nose. I sue you.
Justin, here's a little advice for you. Shut up.
I will not shut up. This is the second time you've assaulted me. I have you locked up and the key thrown away.
Small sighed and started screwing the suppressor into the barrel of his Glock. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my history and maybe, just maybe, you'll shut up. He pulled the slide back, charging the weapon. I'm not from New Orleans, asshole. I'm from Chicago. I made my living for a long time, solving personnel problems for rich and powerful men. My solutions were permanent. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The ex-banker's eyes grew wide as he finally understood who Shorty Small was.
You're a hitman?
I hate that word, but so your feeble mind can actually grasp your situation? Yes.
Shit.
There you go again. Are you finally figuring out how deep you are in it? A slow nod came from the man with the bleeding nose. Now, Justin, want to tell me where the remaining 5 walking sticks are?
I wish I knew.
What does that mean? Woodward removed the towel from his face. Blood still dripped. He rinsed the towel and then pressed it once again on his now crooked nose.
It means we sold them on eBay.
You have records of where you shipped them to, don't you? The man shrugged. Small pointed the suppressed Glock in Woodward's direction and pulled the trigger. The bullet missed the banker's ear by several inches and slammed into the refrigerator. You probably won't get your deposit back now.
Are you crazy?
Maybe, but I'm the person with a gun pointed at you. Raising the palm of his unused hand towards Small, Woodward took a deep breath through his mouth.
Don't. I tell you.
Good. I'm getting tired of your constant lying.
It was shipped out of state to a collector in Texas.
Why do I not believe you?
I'm not lying.
Where in Texas? Woodward hesitated for a second before saying,
Houston.
The Glock spat again, this time nicking the ex-banker's left ear. Now blood dripped from both his nose and ear, running down his face. The gasp he emitted sounded more animal than human.
Okay, just don't shoot again. Small growled. Last chance, Justin. Where are they? Storage unit near Link Buncher train on the east side of the airport. Address. The banker gave him the address and unit number. Just before Small opened the apartment door, he turned. If you're lying or remove the canes before I get there, it will be the last thing you ever do, Justin. Capiche? The banker slowly nodded his head. Homer LaCroix met Small in the same coffee shop they always used for meetings. The big man arrived first and watched the lanky man enter the shop. When he sat down, he gave the ex-hitman a smile. So, you found the walking sticks? Yeah, they're in a storage unit near the airport. I cut the old lock off with a bolt cutter and put a new one on. He handed LaCroix a key. This opens the lock. The tall man did not reach for the offered item. Did you make sure they were there? Small nodded. Why didn't you just take them? With a half smile, the larger man said, You asked me to find them. I found them. You didn't say anything about taking them somewhere. Well, the tourism board wants them delivered to this address. He slid a business card across the table. Small looked at it but did not pick it up. Apparently, you and the tourism board don't understand what these canes are for, do you? LaCroix frowned. The old canes worth a lot of money. The board wants to sell them and recuperate for expenses incurred. In other words, the board hasn't a clue what they are. Okay, Shorty. They know they are old and valuable. Other than that, what's so special about them? Homer, I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. The board is spending way too much money on getting these things back just because they are old and supposedly valuable. Which they aren't. Want to try again? After drumming his fingers on the table where they sat, LaCroix gave Small a half smile. I told him you were a smart guy. They know exactly what they are and how they work. They are, let's say, individuals who oppose the current members of the board. Our employer wants to offer each one of these individuals one of the canes as a peace offering. Small threw his head back and laughed out loud. He then grew serious and looked LaCroix in the eyes. So, they want me to deliver them. Is that what I'm hearing? A nod was his answer. No fucking way. Small stood and tossed the key to the storage unit at LaCroix. Guess you guys need to find another patsy. As the big man made a step toward the coffee shop door, LaCroix said, $50K in cash if you deliver the canes to the address on the card. The ex-hitman froze and turned back to the tall, lanking man. $50K? Another nod. When? As soon as possible. Not that when. When do I get paid? A thick white envelope appeared out of LaCroix's jacket and he placed it on the surface in front of him. Small returned to his chair and the envelope disappeared under the table. When do they want the canes delivered? No later than midnight tonight. Remembering something Madame Toussaint mentioned, he said, I'll figure out a way. When he arrived at the storage unit, the lock he placed there earlier no longer remained. He raised the door and found the entire unit empty. Returning to his SUV, he drove straight to Woodward's apartment. The BMW owned by the ex-banker was nowhere to be seen. Parking his vehicle, Small walked to the front door of the man's apartment and used a small tool from his wallet to pick the flimsy lock. Inside, he withdrew his Glock and searched all of the rooms. No one at home. A laptop occupied a desk in one of the spare bedrooms. Small touched the spacebar and the screen brightened. As he looked closer, an email program revealed the last message opened. The ex-hitman read it, smiled, and returned to his car, leaving the door to the apartment unlocked and slightly ajar. The drive to Baton Rouge took an hour and a half. The sun, low in the sky, would set soon, and dusk would aid him in the next task. Once he pulled into the parking lot of the warehouse owned by Woodward, he saw the BMW X5 parked next to a door. No other vehicles occupied the parking area. Before exiting his Ford Escape, he screwed the suppressor into the Glock. Checking to make sure the gun was charged,
He exited, walked quickly to the door where the BMW was parked, and tried the knob. When it turned in his hand, he shook his head slowly and entered. Woodward stood hunched over a wooden crate on a workbench 15 yards from the entrance. He looked up as Small entered the room. His eyes locked on the Glock pointed at him. "Not you again?" "I thought I told you to leave those things where they were." "You have no idea how valuable they are, Small, and they aren't yours. Get out." Moving toward the middle of the space, Small kept the Glock pointed at Woodward. "Stand aside, Justin. You might actually get out of here alive." With a swift move not expected by the big man, the ex-banker reached into the wood crate and tossed an object toward Small. Stepping aside, the walking stick passed him on the right and fell to the concrete floor with a clatter. As Woodward threw another cane toward him, Small pulled the trigger on the Glock. His aim being true, snapped the shaft in two, and the pieces fell to the floor. Woodward screamed as one of the last canes in the wooden box came alive. The snake raised its head above the crate and hissed at Woodward. Frozen by surprise, the ex-banker stood mesmerized by the serpent's swaying head. It then hissed and struck out toward the man's hand, which still hovered unmoved above the container. Small watched as the snake clamped its fangs into the joint of the man's hand between the index finger and the thumb. Woodward looked on with horror as the snake released his hand and seemed to leap toward the man's head. As the cobra sunk its teeth into the soft tissue of his neck, Woodward's eyes rolled upward out of view and he fell to the concrete floor. The snake stiffened and dissolved into a white and gray powder as Shorty Small looked on. He walked over to the crate and looked in. One last walking stick remained. He then gathered the one he shot in two and placed the pieces in the crate, being careful to avoid the grip of the cane. He then retrieved the one thrown at him. Holding it by the tip of the shaft, he also placed it in the crate. Using a hammer and nails already on the workbench, he placed the lid on the container and secured it. He then carried the closed box to his SUV. Before he left the parking lot, he locked the door of the warehouse and made sure it was closed. At 5 minutes to midnight, he delivered the crate with the remaining walking sticks to the address given to him by LaCroix. 2 days later, LaCroix waited at their usual table at the coffee shop, sipping his beverage as Small walked through the door. As the big man sat, LaCroix said, "What happened?" "I delivered the walking sticks before midnight." "Yes, I was told. There were only 3 and one was broken." Small's mouth twitched. "I used one to protect myself." The lanky man nodded. "Once again, the tourism board is pleased with your work. The banker who stole them can't be located. They want to have him placed under arrest." "No need. Where do you think the missing walking stick went? He won't be stealing anything again." LaCroix sipped his coffee and smiled. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories, No Tears for Sarah, The Bullet, and The Walking Stick by J.C. Fields. J.C. Fields is an award-winning and Amazon best-selling author. He is a full member of the Missouri Writers Guild and is active in numerous other writing groups. His Sean Kruger series has won numerous awards, including multiple gold and silver medals in the Reader's Favorite International Book Contest. The Imposter's Trail was awarded Best Mystery Thriller at the 2017 Ozark Indie Book Fest. In March of 2020, his novel, A Lone Wolf, became a #1 Amazon best-selling audiobook. His second novel in the series, The Last Insurgent, became a #1 Amazon new release in January 2021. All of the aforementioned books can be found on audible.com, narrated by yours truly. If you'd like to learn more about J.C. Fields, you can reach out to him at jcfieldsbooks.com. That's jcfieldsbooks.com. Or bookbub.com/authors/J-C-Fields. You can also reach him at facebook.com/jcfieldsbooks. If you enjoyed tonight's story, hosted by yours truly, Paul J. McSorley, you can search my name on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on YouTube for additional previous stories. If you'd like to hear more lengthy tales, be sure to take a look at my audiobooks. Available now on audible.com or just visit paulsbooks.net. That's PAULSBOOKS.net. You can also find me personally on Facebook and Twitter. And with that, listeners, our weekly journey into the psyche has just about come to a close. But before we go, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us for tonight's episode and remind you to take a moment to stop by our iTunes page and leave Chilling Tales for Dark Nights a 5-star review and a kind word. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you haven't already. And while you're at it, please remember to stop by our Apple Podcast page or wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts and subscribe. The charts are based on subscriptions, not listens. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it. I'm your host for Fear from the Heartland, Paul J. McSorley. I've enjoyed the titillation tonight. Ooh, there's that word again. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again next week at Fear from the Heartland.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.